Well, are you trading meme coins? Are you interested in meme coins?
Not really. I'm more interested in the fact that like it seems like we're visibly out of this bear market that has lasted for like 2.5 years, which is good for everyone, right? Regardless of whether it's manifesting in the shape of meme coins or not. But I think it's the beginning of the next cycle, right? For sure.
I'm really excited. Life is always so much better during a bull cycle.
Yeah, I mean, there's trade-offs, right? Because now, like in the bull cycle, you'll start to see so much noise. Like everybody thinks they're like the next, I don't know what. Like everybody can raise money. So like the one thing I did appreciate about the bear is that like it's legit people, right?
Francisco Agosti, welcome to First Mover.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Jen.
I invited Francisco to First Mover because we often talk about the challenges facing users and getting mainstream adoption in this space, but we don't really talk about the challenges facing developers. It's not easy to build blockchain applications, and maybe that's why they're not easy to use. We're still in the very early days of this technology. Smart contract development, scalability, fees, and interoperability are all challenges being worked on by today's developers, so that when and if a mainstream audience is ready to use these products, it feels as easy to use them as it does to send an email or open up Instagram. App chains are becoming more and more popular. These are application-specific blockchains that are specialized. So unlike public blockchains like, let's say, Ethereum that supports many use cases, app chains are for a singular use case. Developers using app chains can customize the environment to meet their needs, eliminating common challenges faced on multi-app platforms. Besides customization features, app chains offer greater speeds and lower transaction costs. But there are solutions out there like rollups that are similar. In an environment where smart people are creating more and more solutions to the challenges faced by Web3 developers every day, I wanted to know what makes app chains stand out. Do they present new challenges for developers along with their features? And at the end of the day, how will they make the user experience better? Francisco is the CEO of Moondance Labs and co-founder of Tanssi. Moondance Labs created Tanssi. It's an app chain infrastructure protocol, and they just raised $6 million in a funding round. He says that app chains address common layer 1 challenges, improves the user experience, and will eventually enable a cloud-like model for blockchains. Let's take a listen. The protocol is presented by the Stellar Community Fund. Accelerate your Web3 project with Stellar funding. Let's talk all about money, because during the bear market, it was very hard to raise money, but you did so successfully with Moondance Labs. This is the team developing the Tanssi Appchain. You recently raised $6 million to expand the protocol. Talk to me about what your priorities are for this capital.
Yeah, so we just recently closed a round, which was great. The capital will be mainly used to scale the team, right, and to accelerate the development of the protocol. We're looking to launch mainnet in summer, so we're looking at like August/Q3 of this year. And yeah, I mean, this funding is going to be crucial for us to reach mainnet and to just accelerate what we're building. Yeah.
Before we started this interview, we were talking about raising capital, raising money, and it always feels like it's a little bit easier during the bull market. We get these headlines of startups raising a lot of money, but we didn't see that during the last during the last bear cycle. How hard was it for you to remain afloat and continue to raise funds during the bear market?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't easy. I mean, the first round we raised it approximately almost 12 months ago. So like we closed the round in like May of 2023. That was like in the heart of the bear. So it was definitely more challenging. And even the second round, we started it towards like the end of last year, it was still the bear market, right? If anything, we kind of closed the round now that things are starting to pick up. So like when I was closing the round, people were starting to reach out to me like, hey, is there still space? Can I invest, please? But it was already towards the end. So like we did have to go to the bulk of like those raises in the bear market. It's definitely not easy. I think investors are just way more kind of they put a lot more due diligence, right? Especially into the teams. They put a lot more emphasis into like the fundamentals of the project, the token economic model, who's building it, are these founders capable of building something that's going to last the test of time? So yeah, it's definitely not easy, but I think it's also more rewarding, right? When you're able to raise capital in difficult times, and you get like a head start, right? Because you're able to get a head start on other people that are going to then raise like 12, 15 months later where you already have several months building.
Going through what you went through, when you hear about a company or a protocol that raises funds during a bear market, do you consider them maybe more legit, knowing the due diligence that would have happened, especially in the last bear market, given what happened with FTX?
I mean, it's always difficult to generalize, and I don't want to take away credit from teams that do raise in the bull, because it's not like raising is easy, regardless if it's a bull or bear. It's raising is definitely like not an easy thing to do. But yeah, of course, there's respect for teams that are capable of pulling it off in a bear, and it's like what I said before, right? You tend to appreciate these people that are there with you in the trenches, regardless of whether they're competition or not. You have to appreciate the guys or girls that are there, like building where nobody's really believing you. So yeah, there's definitely respect.
All right, let's talk about the Tanssi protocol now. Talk to me about your mission. How's it going to help developers deploy Appchains?
Yeah, so Tanssi, you can kind of think of it as an Appchain infrastructure protocol, right? So we're building something that will make it dramatically easier for developers to build their own layer ones. You can kind of think of Tanssi as a layer one itself, since it is a layer one, but it's kind of a layer one to help deploy other layer ones. And the whole context of this project is that me and my co-founders, we were previously on the founding and core team of Moonbeam prior to starting Tanssi. So Moonbeam kind of became the EVM environment on Polkadot. And it was actually through the process of building Moonbeam that the idea for Tanssi happened. Since as a team, we just experienced firsthand just how difficult it is to build a layer one, right? You have to take care of so many things, ranging from having to bootstrap a validator set, finding out how to incentivize them. Then you launch the chain and you realize how much maintenance and infrastructure management goes into it. You need things like wallets, block explorers, indexers, oracles, bridges, RPC endpoints. So there were just so many variables involved throughout the deployment process that ultimately it resulted in a time to market of like 12 plus months, right? So in general, we just thought, okay, the developer experience is not good. There's a problem to solve, right? And we started speaking to teams on Polkadot, teams building layer ones on Polkadot, Cosmos, Avalanche subnets, and pretty much every single team we spoke to told us they ran into the same issues we did. So after having dozens of conversations, we were like, okay, there's a problem to solve. And that's really when we went all in on Tanssi. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about those conversations you were having. What's, let's say, the major challenge for developers who are attempting to build out layer ones right now?
Yeah, I would say one is definitely security, right? I mean, as a layer one team, one of the biggest responsibilities that you take on as a development team is bootstrapping the security of your own chain, right? And that's really not like a trivial problem to solve. Polkadot's kind of value proposition is in part shared security, but the developer experience of Substrate and Polkadot was not very good anyway. So like beyond that, it was still very difficult to get started. So I think taking that first step is not easy, right? Versus just deploying smart contracts on something like Ethereum, where you're being essentially secured by the Ethereum network without having to bootstrap a validator set yourself. So that already in and of itself is a huge barrier of entry. And then after that, if you manage to like get past that, maintenance, right? You have to like maintain the chain, and then you realize, okay, now I need a bridge. How do I connect to Ethereum or these other chains? I need to index my data on chain, right? I need an oracle. I need RPC endpoints. So there's all these like infrastructural components that are just inherent with running a chain, right? So all these things, it just kind of they're all deterrents for developers, right? It's much easier to just deploy a smart contract where all these tools are already readily available, right? You have Chainlink, you have Etherscan, you have all these great tools for available for Ethereum developers. So I think these are the barriers of entry that we're trying to solve within Tanssi. And there's other competitors, right? There's rollups, there's layer ones, and there's obviously trade-offs between them. But yeah, that's another topic.
Well, talk to me a little bit more about security. How are you thinking about security at Tanssi? How are you interacting with developers? Is there maybe is there a security solution that can address that major challenge that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we're starting off leveraging the relay chain of Polkadot. First of all, our team had a lot of experience using Substrate, given our experience in Moonbeam. Substrate is a very powerful tech stack. Many teams within like the Web3 landscape are using it, even outside of Polkadot. But for us, it was really about, how can we try to abstract away consensus and shared security from teams so that they don't have to take on the responsibility of bootstrapping that themselves in a cost-efficient way, right? Without compromising on decentralization. Because I think this is probably one of the biggest differences between us and maybe a roll-up as a service provider is that when you deploy a rollup on Ethereum, you're kind of inheriting the security of Ethereum mainnet, but it's still centralized, right? You have a single sequencer that's responsible for relaying all these transactions. There's a lot of issues kind of associated with that. I know that there's a lot of teams trying to solve this issue on Ethereum right now. So on Tanssi, yeah, we're leveraging the relay chain of Polkadot that currently provides close to like $10 billion worth of staked value of security, right? With over like 400 validators securing the network. So it's an extremely high grade security environment. That's extremely difficult to replicate, right? Not only bootstrapping hundreds of validators already in and of itself is difficult, but then attracting billions of dollars in staked value to secure that network is arguably even more difficult. So we're leveraging this very high grade security environment. And I think we're going to be able to offer that at a fraction of the cost of a lot of these roll-up as a service providers, right? Like ZK rollups, the ZK computation is quite expensive as it stands. Optimistic rollups, they're going to be affected by gas price increases on Ethereum as hundreds and thousands of rollups potentially start selling on Ethereum. I think Ethereum is just going to be an expensive ecosystem to use. I know there's protocols like Celestia and the recent like Denkun upgrade that improves this, but we'll see how it affects it long term. So I think for us, it was like, okay, Substrate and Polkadot has these like very distinct properties that enables us to offer developers L1s that are extremely secure, extremely decentralized. And I think very little other ecosystems are going to be able to provide that at like in a cost efficient way. But we are exploring I think Ethereum, we want to expand to that, right? So we have our eyes on like things like Eigenlayer. Eigenlayer is very interesting. They're proposing this kind of shared security model as well. So we definitely had that on our roadmap to see what other ecosystems we can expand to moving forward.
Besides cost, if you were to look at just Appchains more generally versus more generally roll-ups, what are some of the benefits for developers to choose the Appchain route?
Yeah. And by Appchain, there's a lot of like terminologies. Some roll-up as a service providers say Appchain when they mean like a roll-up app, roll-app or something like this. I think one of the most relevant ones that comes up when we speak to developers as well is finality. So optimistic rollups in general have pretty poor finality properties, right? Hard finality can take up to like 30 minutes. This is something that with layer ones on Substrate, you can get as low as like 6-second finality, right? And when developers, this is just from us speaking to developers, right? Where we have like over 300 Appchains deployed in our testnet today. And like many of the developers are like, look, we don't want to compromise on centralization and this low finality. We want to have fast finality and we want to have a decentralized environment. And right now developers are having to choose like, okay, I'm going to deploy an instance of my protocol on many different chains. I need to pick a hub to settle these kind of cross-chain transactions. If you have like a hub with poor finality properties, it's a bad combination with cross-chain, right? Because when you introduce cross-chain to the equation, you tend to increase latency because you're taking into account different consensus mechanisms of many different chains. So a lot of developers that come to us, they're like, okay, I want to build my L1 on Tanssi because it can act as a very like efficient hub to settle transactions in a low latency environment, right? So that's something that's relevant. Centralization as well, right? A lot of developers don't feel comfortable with like having just one sequencer on a rollup. The op stack, for example, doesn't even have fault groups. So if something bad happens on the chain, you're kind of relying on the underlying infrastructure team to roll back the chain for you. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? It's just about trade-offs. It depends on what's important to the developer. If super high throughput is important to them, it might be better to go for a rollup since it's with a single sequencer, things tend to be faster, right? But if they don't want to compromise on centralization or decentralization, then it makes more sense to go for an L1. This is usually my feedback, right? When I speak to developers, that it really just comes down to trade-offs. I know there's a lot of protocols out there that say that they're like the best at everything. I'm generally a little bit skeptical when people are claiming they're just like optimized for everything, since I don't think that's the case, at least the way that the Web3 landscape is currently structured.
If we zoom out a little bit, we've talked about how Appchains can solve a few different challenges facing developers right now. But if we zoom out and we look at the customers or the users of the applications that these developers are developing, how does the user experience become better through Appchains?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of developers, there's several areas why we're seeing like demand for Appchains, right? One, which when we started off this journey was a little bit like surprising to me, is kind of the economics behind it, right? Like a lot of developers are attracted by giving more utility to the underlying native token of whatever they're building, right? You can use your own token as like the underlying gas token of the chain, which kind of drives more economics to the project. A lot of teams are like able to like whitelist smart contracts on their given chain, right? For onboarding new users, you can whitelist a specific contract to be gasless. Yeah, I think those are kind of some of the bigger areas. Sovereignty is another big one, right? Like this is one of the use cases that we're seeing a lot with gaming specifically, right? I've seen a lot of use cases where, I don't know, let's say you're building a game in a shared L1 environment and there's a governance decision taken that it could indirectly affect your game, right? It could make like, there was a voting on Kusama, for example, that made a certain game like prohibitively expensive to play because of a governance decision. So a lot of people are attracted by this idea of sovereignty, right? That you control kind of the evolution of your own application and you give more empowerment to the token holders to decide, okay, this is how we want the protocol to evolve without being affected by governance decisions that are affecting everybody on that chain, right? You have dedicated block space, right? For gaming, again, this makes a lot of sense because particularly for on-chain games, right? If you're sharing block space with like hundreds of other projects and gas prices start to increase, that can make it like prohibitively expensive to play a certain game, right? So a lot of the games that we're that are building on Tanssi, they love this idea of having just sovereign dedicated block space to have like a predictable fee market for the game. And what we're even starting to see is kind of hybrid models, right? Where I think we have this like misconception now where it's a binary decision, right? Okay, I either build an Appchain or I use smart contracts. What we're starting to see in our tests and our use cases that are hybrid, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to offload the on-chain game logic to a dedicated Appchain to Tanssi, but I'll leverage Moonbeam or Ethereum to like for DeFi, right? Building liquidity from scratch in an Appchain, that's kind of a trade-off. It's extremely difficult. So I can leverage an existing DeFi ecosystem, list my token there, access like NFT marketplaces that already have volume, and you can use message passing to connect like the best of both worlds, right? So I think Web3 in general is going to head into the space where maybe Appchains don't have to like, the entire application doesn't have to live on an Appchain, right? You can maybe offload specific logic of a given application to dedicated block space through Tanssi while still leveraging Ethereum or these other shared EVM environments for other types of logic.
And Francisco, if you were to look into your crystal ball, talk to me about what the future of Appchains looks like. If we look at what's happening right now with layer 1s, layer 2s, layer 3s, how do Appchains seamlessly integrate into the infrastructures that are being built right now?
Yeah, I think if I look into my crystal ball, I tend to look at like the evolution of Web 2 as analogous to what will happen on Web 3. I think like blockchain in general will move into these more like cloud-like models. So I don't think that like full applications will live on like a given Appchain, right? I think it relates to what I just said before. I think developers will be able to tap into like sovereign dedicated block space on demand, right? Whenever they need to, instead of having to like bootstrap their own validator set, having to like produce blocks every X amount of seconds, no matter what. Since that's another problem we're seeing is that you bootstrap your entire Appchain, you have to pay a bunch of validators, and then you realize many blocks are empty, right? So there's also this like capital inefficiency problem with Appchains where it's like you're overpaying for the economics of it. I think things are going to move into a more on-demand model, similar to AWS, right? You're paying for like compute power on demand. I think it's going to move into that direction in Web3 as well, and this is where shared security is important, right? Because you can just tap into like a shared security ecosystem, pay for maybe a given block that's yours. You have dedicated on like sovereign block space on demand for maybe some specific logic or component of your application. I think things are going to generally move in that direction, and maybe you can have smart contracts on Ethereum, you can have smart contracts in other environments, and have these type of hybrid models. So in general, I think that's kind of more or less to where it's heading. It's difficult to say like who are going to be the winners, what specific shape it's going to take, but I kind of see that direction in general.
Francisco, thanks so much for joining the show.